This show furnished by Key Light Counseling Center.
Are you looking for an alternative to drug and alcohol rehabilitation that allows you to recover in the privacy of your own home with an individualized program that meets your specific needs? Concierges Detox LA can be that alternative. Headed by medical addiction specialist Dr. Damon Raskin and clinical psychologist Dr. Howard Gluss, Concierges Detox LA will design an individualized program to meet your recovery needs. For more information, contact Concierges Detox LA at 323-935-9712.
Although you'll be receiving valuable advice from our host, please remember this is not therapy. It does not replace a relationship with a qualified mental health professional.
I'm Dr. G, and we are here with Engaging Minds. This is every Sunday night from 8 to 9 p.m. We got a great show coming up. Let me give you that number if you want to call in to our show, and it's 1-800-222-5222. And what I wanted to talk about tonight was the Right to Die Act, which is called the End of Life Option Act here in California. I'm fascinated by it. And I found a statistic that I wanted to share with everyone. From June 9th to December 31st, 2016, 111 terminally ill people have legally ended their lives in the state of California. And that's from a number originally that had a prescription at 191 people who received the life-ending prescription. 111 actually went through with the act. And in order to understand it a lot more and to get some insight into it, I have some great guests coming up who are going to help us dig a little deeper. That's what we do here every week. And they are Karen Morin-Green. She's with Compassionate Choices, an oncology nurse and hospice nurse. We have Rabbi Mordechai Finley, who's going to call in a little bit later. He's with Or HaTorah Synagogue, and he's going to give us a Jewish perspective on the End of Life Act. And we have Dr. Damon Raskin, who is a medical director of Mid-Valley Hospice. And I want to welcome them all to the show. So we're going to start off with Karen. Karen, I know we had talked about this statistic before the break, and I was going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on it and why we don't have more recent statistics.
Well, the law itself has just been enacted last June 2016. So we have statistics because the doctors will send in information after a patient is ingested. So we have that 6-month statistic, but this last year we won't have for another 6 months.
So do you have a sense of, is it something that's becoming more popular with people, or is there more of a need for it?
Well, it's one thing to have a law on the books, but it's another thing to have people understand what the law is, how it's enacted, and how to access the law. A lot of it is finding physicians who will write prescriptions for patients who want it.
Right. Let's ask Dr. Raskin about that. I want to welcome you back to the show. So, again, we had talked about this before the show, that a lot of physicians will not write prescriptions for this. So I was wondering if you could tell us, what issues people face.
Well, absolutely. And I'm a doctor that believes in compassion. And if a patient qualifies for the law, then a physician still has to be able to be willing to write the prescription and give it to the patient. So we need to spend a few minutes discussing who that type of patient is. So the patient has to be determined by two different physicians to have a terminal illness and really have a life expectancy of 6 months or less. And again, that has to be determined by two different physicians. And the patient has to be of sound mind. They can't be confused or suffer from severe emotional problems. In addition, they have to request that they receive this prescription 3 different times. 2 different times orally, 1 different time in writing, and they have to be 15 days apart from each other. And in addition, they have to be able to swallow the prescription. So all of those things have to be there to be able to qualify for this law, and then they still have to find a physician to be able to give that to them.
So there's a lot of balances and checks with the whole process.
Very much so. It's a very burdensome law, but we find that there are very often, once a patient realizes that this is something they want, they're often very sick. They've been through many types of treatments that have failed. And we found in California, 87% of those that have used the law were on hospice. And we very much recommend that patients are on hospice when they use this law.
Now, what happens if someone, I was curious, you said there's all these different times a person has to request. What happens if someone gets too sick in that process? Can a conservator or someone take over?
So no.
No, this is very much driven by the patient themselves. They have to request it. They start the procedure. They have to request individually for the prescription, and they can stop it at any time. So the important thing we're trying to get across to patients that they understand that it's something you want to consider before. Often when patients are ill, it's something they want to think about in the long term. You want to talk to your doctor ahead of time. Gee, if I would become terminal ill at some point, and this is something I want to consider, is this something that you would write a prescription for? Often when patients find out and find that they're at the end or they begin to suffer, they find it's too late. This 15-day waiting period, finding a physician, it can be very, very troublesome.
That's been my experience with it, actually dealing with a patient recently. By the time his cancer advanced, he was actually too sick to follow through with it.
So it's important to talk about all end-of-life options ahead of time. And my experience as someone who worked with cancer patients in support groups, many times people want to talk about death and dying. They want to talk with their family. They want to talk with their physicians. And they're unsure how to bring it up and when to bring it up. So we're encouraging patients to talk to their families, talk to their physicians early, because this can very much take a long time.
I was curious, Dr. Raskin, is there ever something that you would actually bring up with patients?
Oh, it's something that I definitely talk about with patients and with families, especially those patients who are on hospice. Now, hospice is a service. It's not a place. Some people believe hospice is a place that people go to die. That's not true at all. Hospice is a service. There are many companies out there. Mid-Valley Hospice is the one that I am the medical director of, and I think they do a great job. And what they do is we basically come in and we look at the patient. We determine that the patient does indeed have a terminal illness, and then we focus on comfort care. We focus on compassion. We focus on relieving suffering, relieving anxiety through medications, whatever they may be. Now, that's different than the end-of-life act, which actually gives the patient control in deciding when they're going to end their life. So this is not about a physician killing a patient or physician-assisted suicide. This is about giving the patient back control and having dignity at the end of their life and compassion. That's what this is about, and I think that's a very important point.
Yeah, many of these patients, they truly want to live. They don't want to live. They've been through all kinds of treatments. Often they'll say, what will the end be like? They don't want to suffer. And we know from our statistics that often people turn to this because they're afraid of what is going to happen at the end. They don't want to suffer. So often, just having the medication is enough to bring them some peace and comfort.
No, I was wondering about that because of some of the psychological issues. You said earlier on, Dr. Raskin, that someone has to be of sound mind, and how does that determine? Because I would also assume that people who are dealing with issues a lot of times are facing issues of depression or anxiety. So
sure. So as long as it's determined by the two physicians that the patient can actually make their own decision, then they're determined to be of sound mind. They can still be sad. They can be depressed, but as long as they're not demented and confused, as long as the doctor doesn't feel that there's some ulterior motive that the family has, that the patient needs to, die
something
quickly.
I definitely want to talk about during this show.
Absolutely.
Because that's some of the emails I got is people concerned about ulterior motives.
And I'm happy to explore with you some of my experiences with these families, because I've had a few over the last few months. When I walk into the house, it's not just dealing with the patient. I've actually dealt with family members along with the patient and had conversations in determining whether the patient was appropriate for this act. And it's really, really been very touching for me to experience that.
That's the most important thing I want our audience to hear, that this is really an act about giving people control and giving people dignity at the end of their lives. No one really probably wants to deal with the issue, but if they're facing it, they want to have some sort of control. That's what I'm hearing, and some sort of sense the end of their suffering. Now, I know, Karen, you had told me earlier on that it's very personal for you about how you got into this work. I want to talk a little bit more about it right after the commercial, but I do want our audience to hear how compassionate you are about this care. And Dr. Raskin mentioned earlier that he's with Mid-Valley Hospice. And I actually have an experience with them too, and I want to say they're fantastic. And they are actually one of our new sponsors on the show. So if anyone out there needs any hospice care and you are a qualified patient who may be able to use the End of Life Option Act, definitely contact Midlife Hospice at 818-403-3940. Again, that's 818-403-3940. And you'll also be able to contact Dr. Raskin there. I'm Dr. Gluss. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back after the commercials.
Mid-Valley.
Yeah, you said...
As a small business owner, you make every dollar count. So what could you do with $10? Go to Vistaprint.com today and you'll get 500 high-quality custom business cards for only $9.99. That's less than 2 cents per card. And at Vistaprint, your satisfaction is absolutely guaranteed. So it's never been easier to turn 500 strangers into connections. Just visit Vistaprint.com and use promo code 4000 at checkout. That's Vistaprint.com, promo code 4000.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit beefy, or even with type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Affordable term life insurance is out there. Call Term Provider and speak with Big Lou at 800-481-1458. 800-481-1458 or visit biglou.com. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too. Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit beefy, or even with type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Affordable term life insurance is out there. Call Term Provider and speak with Big Lou at 800-481-1458. 800-481-1458 or visit biglou.com. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too.
As a small business owner, you make every dollar count. So what could you do with $10? Go to Vistaprint.com today and you'll get 500 high-quality custom business cards for only $9.99. That's less than 2 cents per card. And at Vistaprint, your satisfaction is absolutely guaranteed. So it's never been easier to turn 500 strangers into connections. Just visit Vistaprint.com and use promo code 4000 at checkout. That's Vistaprint.com, promo code 4000.
Are you looking for an alternative to drug and alcohol rehabilitation that allows you to recover in the privacy of your own home with an individualized program that meets your specific needs? Concierges Detox LA can be that alternative. Headed by medical addiction specialist Dr. Damon Raskin and clinical psychologist Dr. Howard Gluss, Concierges Detox LA will design an individualized program to meet your recovery needs. For more information, contact Concierges Detox LA at 323-935-9712.
Welcome back to Engaging Minds with your host, Dr. Howard Gluss, licensed clinical psychologist.
I'm Dr. G, and we are back with the show. And I do want to make a little correction. The first thing is, I guess it's because it was just my birthday. The first time I said midlife hospice care, it's Mid-Valley Hospice Care, and I corrected that the second time. And I want to give you another number, and it's 818-862-2600. That's 818-862-2600, and that's the number to call. And again, if you don't have a chance to write that down or you're driving in your car, you could always email me at drhowardgluss@live.com, and I can send the information to Mid-Valley Hospice. And before we get back on the show and talk about your Karen's personal passion of why she's in this work, I wanted to take a caller. Her name is Brenda. She's from Manhattan Beach, and her question to both of you is around Alzheimer's and the right to die, planning ahead of time. So I think that's a great question. Brenda, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you.
And why don't you tell our guests what your question is?
Well, My concern for the future, if there is Alzheimer's in the family, and I say was eventually diagnosed with Alzheimer's or a disease similar to that, where I knew at some point I would be basically being taken care of, but I guess the word could be out of mind completely. And I don't want to be that way. I don't want to be in a home or have the burden for my children to pay for that care where I'm basically not here. I'm in, a state with Alzheimer's, but obviously when you're diagnosed with it, you're not at that point yet. Is there anything, I'm wondering, that you could put in writing for the future? And at a point where you felt that this was happening, I mean, would you be able to, at that point, sign documentation if you knew? It's just a tricky question, I know, because it's, you all mentioned you had to be of sound mind.
That's correct, Brenda. No, and I understand your fear, especially if there's a family history. I would encourage you to go to the website for Compassionate Choices. We talk very much, there's a section on advance directives and planning ahead. And that's basically what I would tell anyone to do is plan ahead, have someone you trust very much who you've spoken to a great deal about how you feel and what you want at end of life, and have that healthcare person as your proxy. You'll also find on our website some information on advance directives that can be very specific for dementia issues, how you want to be treated at the end of life if and when you decide you don't want to eat, whether you want a feeding tube. Sometimes patients are not hungry and or how infections may be treated. So I very much encourage you to look at the website and have a very good advance directive and talk often with your family about what your wishes are.
I do want to make a correction. I was told I gave the wrong number again, so apologies for that. And we'll be giving out the number throughout the show. It's 818-386-2600, and that's the number for Mid-Valley Hospice Care. Dr. Raskin?
Yeah, I agree. It's about planning, and you're right. If you came to me and you already have advanced dementia, or your family member does, I can't actually grant you the end-of-life option, but I can grant you hospice care. And again, that could be also extremely compassionate. We at Mid-Valley Hospice really believe that it's about quality of life and not quantity of life, about reducing the burden of medications that aren't for, important things. Sometimes I see elderly patients on 26 medicines and 42 supplements, and I start looking at them going, do we really need all of this for quality of life? And so, again, I believe in reducing the medications, except if they're for comfort, if they're for relieving anxiety, if they can help with painful situations, then that's what I believe we should be doing. So although we can't grant that, we still can grant hospice care, which I think can also be very, very compassionate.
Does that answer your question, Brenda?
It does. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the information.
Thank you very much for calling in. And actually, Karen, we have Rabbi Finley on, so I'm going to bring him on right now. Rabbi Finley, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
And the reason, one of the reasons I wanted you on is that a lot of people feel that there is a conflict between religion and this act, or spirituality in this act. And I was wondering what your thoughts were around the End of Life Act.
Well, first of all, the idea of a right is an idea that is fairly alien to Western religious traditions, because a right is understood to be a right against, let's say, the government from interfering on how you want to live your life. So the right to free speech means the government can't tell you what to say or what not to say. Now, religion, on the other hand, usually means the invitation of the tradition of God, of the instruction from Scripture, etc., to actually manage your life all the way down to your inner private life. So, for example, religion tells us not to hold a grudge, to love God, to love our neighbor. So, rights keeps other citizens out, and religion invites God in. So, from this perspective, you'll find in every religious tradition, including the Jewish tradition, a wide spectrum of views on a person facing end of life. I would say the most orthodox, traditional, maybe evangelical view would be that this is in God's hands and one does not interfere with God's will. So you wait until the natural end. The more you move over the spectrum into the more moderate and liberal denominations in Judaism and Christianity, you'll find a much greater respect for the right of the individual to take control of, to determine his or her own end, as I've heard your other guests so eloquently speak to.
I think that's really. Any thoughts about that, as far as how family members deal with it and the conflict and religion, your own personal experiences dealing with family members around this?
Sure, I can add personal experience, and I like your guess. I've been at the bedside of many dying people, and this is even in a time when palliative care was looked down upon. And I remember people in just excruciating pain, and physicians really being afraid to give enough, let's say morphine, for example, because the doctor then would be accused of actually killing the patient. And patients were just pleading to the doctor, please administer more pain. I don't want to have this kind of pain. Doctor says, I can't give you any more because it would kill you, and then I'll be in trouble. And I would remember at the time thinking to myself, asking, internally for the doctor to not worry so much about, you might say, the law, but rather the spirit of the law, the moral dimension. And so the more there's the movement toward right to die with dignity, it's a great relief for me to know that people don't have to die in such excruciating pain. Now, I know there is palliative care in hospice, but I think this adds yet another dimension to adding to the dignity of the dying person.
Well, I think that's great that you said that, and I think that for a lot of the families that I've been dealing with this, there is sometimes a conflict in terms of their religious and spiritual beliefs and then what their family member wants to do. But in the end, what they see is a family member who's hurting, who wants control, yes, who wants help. They don't necessarily want to die, but they can't live in this world the way it is. And so they're really looking for hope, and I think that this can provide hope.
Yes, and you've articulated very well. So oftentimes when I work with families, there is, for example, I will work with someone, let's say in my community, which is, we're somewhere between Reform and Conservative, and let's say they have an Orthodox relative who comes in and says, absolutely not, they can't do it, as if they are protecting the tradition. But the more time they're actually listening to the human being, they realize there's a moment when the tradition just runs out. And the tradition runs out when you're encountering a human being in an existential state of facing the end of their life in excruciating pain. And I think, we talk about spirituality, it's where a person's experience of their own spiritual journey becomes more important than a doctrinal understanding of that person's spiritual journey. So I've seen those family struggles, and I'm very much on the side of seeing that religion, at a certain point, it can't just be about doctrine.
No, it's got to be about compassion.
Very much
exactly.
so.
Compassion and care for people's souls.
And Karen, with that, why don't you share some of your personal experience around this issue and why you're so passionate about it?
Well, my nursing background was I started during the AIDS crisis and then worked on an oncology unit before becoming a hospice nurse. I also lost my husband at 52 and of a brain tumor. And Michael died at home. And so I felt very passionate about the fact that as a hospice nurse, I wanted everyone to be able to get the best death possible, both for the patient and for the families involved. And I very much saw that there were times that even as a hospice nurse, you could do everything you wanted to do, but there were times when patients were truly suffering. And it was taking often very long time, and the families weren't comfortable with what was happening. So when they were beginning to talk about the California End-of-Life Option Act, I very much wanted to get involved legislatively and advocate for patients and help to bring this to pass. And so I've worked with Compassionate Choices. I now coordinate a team of volunteers all over Southern California, and we will work one-on-one with patients as they look at all end-of-life options that to try and figure out what may be the best one for them. And I've seen families come together often when they're not sure of what to do, often when they don't naturally agree with the patient, but always at the end, the family's there together, and it is a very peaceful end.
Well, I think a lot, when I listen to you and I listen to the rabbi talk, I think it's very much about celebrating life, that you're giving people, as you said, a quality of life, and it does psychologically challenge us as a society dealing with this issue of death and dying that so many people are afraid to talk about. But this is what I love about it. Us talking about it actually gives people a sense that it's not something too scary to talk about, and it's actually something that you can embrace and celebrate as a way of celebrating someone's life.
Exactly. And even though the numbers are a little low in terms of who is actually using the law, we do know from our experience in Oregon that having this law on the books for very many people, we are now talking about death and dying. The conversation is getting started at a much earlier time.
Yeah, we're going to continue that conversation after the commercial. I'm Dr. Howard Gluss. If you want to call in, it's 1-800-222-5222, and we'll be right back.
Are you wondering how to improve your relationships and your life? Are you curious if we've all been through what you're experiencing? Well, take a seat on the couch with Dr. Leanna and me, Eric Scott Smith, Fridays at midnight, right here on Talk Radio 790 KABC.
It happens every January, right? Happy New Year! Motivated by a sense of a fresh start for tackling those home improvement projects that maybe never got done the year before. But you're ready to get to work in 2018. But what questions do you have before you start? Well, I'm here to help and give you the tips on how to get the job done right. From sewers to shingles, all you have to do is call. Join me, Lou Manfredini, on House Smarts Radio every Saturday morning live from 8 to 9 a.m. on Talk Radio 790 KABC.
If you ever want to buy a house or a car, you're going to want to know your credit score. If there's a mistake on your credit reports, you could pay more in interest rates and fees than you have to. Where can you go online to quickly get your credit score and credit report for free? CreditKarma.com/radio. Check it whenever you like. It's free and there's no catch. Don't get an unwanted surprise about your credit score. Go to CreditKarma.com/radio. That's CreditKarma.com/radio.
Talk Radio 790 KABC News Update. I'm Steve Cumming. The Minnesota Vikings are heading to the NFC Championship after a shocking 29-24 win over New Orleans. Saints quarterback Drew Brees says despite the loss, he's proud of his team.
Obviously, with everything at stake, with the fact it's playoffs, it's win or go home, the way we battled back, this would have been one for the ages had we been able to pull it off.
Brees had put the Saints in position for Will Lutz's go-ahead 43-yard field goal with 25 seconds remaining after rallying from a 17-point deficit. The Vikings were out of timeouts and nearly out of options when quarterback Case Keenum dropped back with 10 seconds to go from his 39 and threw high into a crowd. Diggs jumped in front of Marcus Williams, held his ground, kept his feet in bounds, and raced untouched into the end zone. KABC SoCal weather, partly cloudy tonight with lows in the lower to mid-50s. More news coming up and continuous coverage on KABC.com. I'm Steve Cumming, Talk Radio 790 KABC News.
Are you looking for an alternative to drug and alcohol rehabilitation that allows you to recover in the privacy of your own home with an individualized program that meets your specific needs? Concierges Detox LA can be that alternative. Headed by medical addiction specialist Dr. Damon Raskin and clinical psychologist Dr. Howard Gluss, Concierges Detox LA will design an individualized program to meet your recovery needs. For more information, contact Concierges Detox LA at 323-935-9712.
Welcome back to Engaging Minds with your host, Dr. Howard Gluss, licensed clinical psychologist.
I'm Dr. G, and we're back with the show. I also wanted to give you some information on Mid-Valley Hospice. You could reach them, too, at their website at midvalleyhospice.com. And they have a lot of information about hospice care and also the End of Life Option Act. So again, that is midvalleyhospice.com. We have another call. We're going to take it. It's Amber. She's calling from Los Angeles. Oh, she'll be on in a moment. We're just trying to get her all set up. So I wanted to talk to all our guests, Rabbi Finley, Karen, and Dr. Raskin. I was reading something from the Family Focus, and they're opposed to this act and some of the issues that they bring up, and I wanted to hear your comments on them. One of the issues was that this act will lead to elder abuse because family members may benefit by utilizing the Right to Die Act. Any thoughts about that?
Well, I think, those concerns are, of course, good ones, but I think that's why there are so many hoops to jump through with this law. That's why it takes two different physicians. It takes the person to again, ask in writing as well as two different times orally. And the doctor has to feel comfortable that this is the right situation for this act. And in discussing this with family members and discussing this with the patient, it really is up to the two physicians to determine if this is correct. And I think those barriers are there for a reason, and I think that's the main one.
Yeah, we know that there's not been a single documented case of any kind of abuse or coercion in the 40-plus years, combined years, in the 6 states where there is an End-of-Life Option Act on the books. Even the Disability Rights Oregon has confirmed it hasn't received a complaint. So it's really an unfounded thought.
Rabbi Finley, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think if you look at an organization such as Focus on the Family, I think they actually begin axiomatically that they're against the idea of physician-assisted suicide. You can call this options, and we can call this empowering people, but ultimately it's a person taking his or her own life. So Focus on Family, I believe, starts with the idea that would be against God's law, and then they provide justifications for their idea to appeal to someone who might be secular. So I agree with your other guests. I think the law is extremely carefully written, and I haven't read of any evidence of this what they're fearing actually coming about.
You know, as Dr. Raskin explained at the beginning of our show, just how complex the law is and how many steps have to be taken. So I agree with that too. Again, I think it psychologically, it confronts some of our very personal issues around death and dying. We have a call. Her name is Amber, and her question is around the vetting process for end-of-life care. Amber, I want to welcome you to the show. And she'll be on in a moment. We're going to get her.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Hi, Amber. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is a pleasure. Thank you for calling in. So, why don't you share your question with our guests?
I'm really just interested in the vetting process in terms of, like, I know you guys have been talking a lot about this already, but particularly when it comes to research for a given illness or chronic illness, and, basically if a person changes their mind, or if shortly after they go through with this process, suddenly there's research available and the family regrets it. So just kind of wondering about that process of, like, how do you weigh the pros and cons of a decision like this when, technology and medicine is changing daily?
Now, remember, when someone requests medical aid in dying, they have already been determined that they have 6 months or less, and often these patients have already had multiple treatments. And as part of the process, when one makes a request to the doctor in one of those first 2 visits will also inform them of any other treatments that would be available to them.
That's right.
So always in these situations, there are no other treatments available. The patient is then, once the medication is prescribed, they can change their mind at any time. I've been at the bedside of patients, and when the medication is mixed up, it actually is either a liquid or some capsules, and it's given to the patient. We again always ask them, do you understand what you're doing? Is this what you want to do? So there's many times when they can change their mind. But remember, these are patients who are actively dying.
Dr. Raskin, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, and I always talk to patients about, do they understand what this means if they take this medication? Do they understand that they can change their mind at any time? And even when the prescription medication is delivered to the patient, they don't have to take it that minute. They can take it the next day, they can take it the next week, or they can take it the next month. And they can choose not to take it at all. I've had patients go through with the whole process of the end of life. They received the prescription, and they ended up, in the end, just passing away naturally, or with hospice, with compassion, that sort of thing. So again, patients can, one of the most important things of the law is that they really have to be of sound mind and to be able to make these decisions themselves. So they are choosing, with the doctor's guidance, that there really isn't any other options to end their life.
And what I like about what you said right there, I just want to add something real quick, is that I know if I was in that process, knowing that I had that option would give me a lot of peace of mind too. So if I ended up dying from natural causes, that's fine. But knowing that and that sense of choice and dignity would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, very often it's about pain, it's about loss of control, it's about their quality of life. But very much often they get the medication and their pain maybe is controlled. They put it on the shelf. They leave it for another day, or they're waiting to see if things get much worse. Sometimes they have family members around. I think it's important to understand what actually happens. If anyone has been with someone who has died, I think it's important to realize that patients will take the medication with their families often around, and they fall asleep. And within 20 to 40 minutes, they may fall asleep, fall into a coma, and within the next couple hours, they will die peacefully.
Rabbi Finley, you were going to say something?
Well, I think your Amber asked about people reconsidering and so forth. And oftentimes I've seen when families do discuss this, there are really other things going on. Sometimes the person, the family, feels they have unfinished business with a dying person, and they just don't want them to go because they feel there are things that have not been said that need to be said that maybe actually won't ever be said. There are sometimes family members who feel tremendous guilt that the longer they extend the life of the dying person, they can be of service to the person. Maybe they've not been present to the dying person before, and this is the time for them to act on whatever their agenda might be. So a lot of the conflict that I've seen around people dying is oftentimes people's own personal, sometimes very painful, tragic needs projected on to this period of a person's dying. And that's where I like the idea that this act really focuses on a person choosing their own death, when they want to die and how they want to die. And also, I think you've mentioned how this act and this program, for example, has raised people's consciousness about this. I want to share with you that many, many years ago, at one of our religious services, I noticed that every week we say a prayer for people's healing. People come up to me and they share a name, and everybody announces the name, and then I say a prayer for everybody's recovery. But at the same time, in the congregation, I look out, and there are many people who have a loved one who is actually dying. They will have passed within a week or a month. And I actually created a prayer for the dying, not a prayer for recovery, but a prayer for a good death.
A prayer for good death. That's very enlightened.
I can very basically, I say, for those in the last days or hours of life, we ask that God will grant them an easy passage from this world into the next. A time without fear, a time without pain, a time of insight and acceptance and love and forgiveness and hope and faith and trust in God's embrace in the coming world.
That's really nice. Now, I just wanted I know Dr. Raskin wanted to add something to this.
Amber, I just wanted to go back to your question about the vetting process. What's nice and what's reassuring about the vetting process is that at Mid-Valley Hospice, it's not just me. I'm the medical director. I'm a physician there. I will go see the patient. But again, there has to be a second physician. So we at Mid-Valley have another doctor completely, does not even know anything about the patient, walks in and asks all the same questions. And again, deems that the patient is truly dying within 6 months, truly of sound mind, truly knows what they're doing and understands the implications. So that's part of the vetting process, and I wanted to make sure that your question was answered.
Amber, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I did want to say one other thing that, if it's okay.
Sure.
Just related to typical suicide, so not physician assisted. We, in many cases, case after case of those who attempt to commit suicide after the fact, they regret that decision to try to commit suicide, and they feel thankful that they didn't die. We don't have that opportunity with physician-assisted suicide to know whether or not they feel that way after the fact. And I know that, in end-of-life situations, there's often depression and other mental health issues that are playing a role in how they're feeling, similar to, typical suicide. So just thinking about, I guess there's just no way, of knowing how a person is going to feel, obviously, after they've gone through it.
But I did want to, go ahead, Karen. Go ahead.
As I said, it's really not, we have to try and choose our language very carefully, because you have to realize that these patients are already dying. And we have had the American Association of Suicidology, dedicated to preventing suicide, has come out and said that this has no bearing on physician-assisted or medical aid in dying, because there is a distinct difference because of patients who commit suicide as opposed to those who are dying from a terminal disease. It's very, very different. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand the
one of the things that's getting really clear to me is, and I want it to be clear to our audience, just how complex this vetting process is, that there's so many steps that have to be taken. So the thought that this is just something that's not taken seriously or just, administered without thought is definitely not the case. So I was just wondering, Amber, does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
No, it's an excellent question, and I want to thank you for calling in.
Of course. Thank you.
That's what's getting, one of the things I wanted to address, we're going to go for commercial in a minute, but I was dealing with a family who was dealing with this issue, and it was an elderly woman who was passing away, and her husband she really wanted to utilize the End of Life Act, but her husband was so resistant, and it was very much around his issues of not wanting to accept her death. She accepted it, but he was really resistant, and there was so much conflict going on between them that it almost felt like, as a psychologist who was dealing with them, she would have been better off without him present. He was the one who was having all the issues. So I'm wondering, do you ever have any counseling or anything like that set up for the families around these kind of issues? Because it's got to be rough for everyone.
So just at Mid-Valley Hospice, there are spiritual counselors, there are psychologists, there are social workers, case managers. There are these people available. Yeah,
we're going to take a break and find out more about that. I'm Dr. Howard Gluss. If you want to call in, it's 1-800-222-5222.
Individuals and businesses with tax problems, listen carefully. If you owe over $10,000 in back taxes or have unfiled tax returns, U.S. Tax Shield can help you take back control. The IRS can seize your bank accounts, garnish your paycheck, close your business, and file criminal charges. Our team of tax attorneys can stop collections and get you protected. U.S. Tax Shield offers a price protection guaranteed quote to get you protected today. U.S. Tax Shield is A+ rated with the BBB, so call 800-466-9625. U.S. Tax Shield, 800-466-9625.
Message and data rates may apply.
Guys, this may be the last time you ever have to think about hair loss. Because I'm telling you, Bosley is the real deal. They're giving men their hair back permanently. Their real hair. All it takes to get started on the hair gain train is a single text message. You'll get an absolutely free information kit and a free gift card when you text FUN to 85850. Check them out now. Bosley will show you for free how great your hair could look. Dude, this isn't your dad's hair loss treatment. People all over the country trust Bosley because they're America's #1 hair restoration expert, ahead of the curve with the latest technology. And the best part, Bosley's solution is permanent. You're going to love what they'll do for your hair. So drop what you're doing long enough to send a text. Get your free information kit and gift card for $250 off by texting FUN to 85850. Don't forget, That's FUN to 85850.
Attention shoppers, clean up on aisle 14. Clean up on aisle 14. Someone dropped a jar of pickles. Kosher pickles.
Beatboxing at a big box store. Surprising. What's not surprising? How much you could save by switching to Geico.
A red minivan has the lights on in the parking lot.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Geico.
Are you looking for an alternative to drug and alcohol rehabilitation that allows you to recover in the privacy of your own home with an individualized program that meets your specific needs? Concierges Detox LA can be that alternative. Headed by medical addiction specialist Dr. Damon Raskin and clinical psychologist Dr. Howard Gluss, Concierges Detox LA will design an individualized program to meet your recovery needs. For more information, contact Concierges Detox LA at 323-935-9712.
Welcome back to Engaging Minds with your host, Dr. Howard Gluss, licensed clinical psychologist.
This show furnished by Keylight.
I'm Dr. D, and we are back with the show. I did want to mention, you heard the commercial of Dr. Raskin, and he is also with myself. We're involved in Concierges Detox LA. What we're trying to do with people is offer an alternative where people can get detox services in the privacy of their home, and we personalize our services. So if you want to find out more information about that, it's 323-935-9712, and that's Concierges Detox LA, and that's Dr. Damon Raskin, who is also the one of the clinical directors at Mid-Valley Hospice. So Dr. Raskin wears many hats, and again, if you want the correct number for Mid-Valley Hospice, it's 818-386-2600, and that's midvalleyhospice.com, and they are amazing and compassionate, and as you can see from Dr. Raskin, very knowledgeable about the issue. And Karen works with them too, right, Karen?
Yes, often I work with Compassionate Choices, and we have volunteers who work one-on-one with clients, and very often we do refer to Mid-Valley Hospice and a number of hospices. I think often what patients don't realize is they do have a choice in hospices. Often a doctor may recommend one, but I think it's very important to reach out, call the hospice, and make sure that they support the end-of-life options that they might be considering. Not all hospices are the same.
And that's what I want people to know. And Karen, if people wanted to find out more about your work or how to get in contact with you, how could they do so?
You can look at our website, Compassionate Choices California, and we have a 800 number, 800-247-7421. We also have a doc-to-doc line that will work with doctors who may not be as familiar with medical aid in dying or maybe working with it the first time. And we have an 800 number that will help you patients understand all end-of-life options and advance directives.
And I do want to remind our audience, if you missed any of that, you can also contact me at drhowardgluss@live.com, and I'll forward the information. Or you can go directly to midvalleyhospice.com, and you'll get lots of information, and Karen will get the information from that. And our show, to remind you, too, will be available on podcast. Rabbi Finley, if people, are inspired by your work and wanted to find out more about what you do and your congregation, how could they do so?
We are Or HaTorah Synagogue, and just write office at orhatorah.org. The website is available, and people just go to the website and click on any of the boxes, and we'll get in touch with them if they want us to reach out. We'd be happy to have anybody come attend our services.
I think that's wonderful, and I got to tell you, I've been thinking about that prayer that you wrote, and we've all been talking. We're all kind of shaking our head. You can't really see it on radio, but very inspired and very touching. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Sure.
And
I just want to say that
sure.
I extended it for those who care for the dying. And if I could it's about 2 sentences.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I follow with the following. And may God guide and strengthen the hands and the hearts of all of those who are caring for and attending to the dying. that they be able to provide the dying with a last time among us of dignity and nobility and love and belonging and hope and faith and trust in God's embrace in the coming. Now, what I wanted to share with you, when I began to add this prayer, many people said to me that it made them aware, just as your show is and your very fine guests are saying, it made them aware that in addition to caring to people so that they recover, there is an actual spiritual discipline in attending to and being present to a dying person. And so many people arrive, at the possibility of a person dying or the likelihood, really in a panic. They don't know what to do and they haven't thought about it. And the idea there's actually a spiritual discipline for a family on how to be present to a dying person. There's also a spiritual discipline on how to die. And so my realization, the same realization that your other guests have come up to, is we have to put this out there. We have to make people conscious of the idea that dying is inevitable for all of us, and it is the last great stage in the journey, at least in this realm. And this journey should be entered into with us and our families with great mindfulness and great purpose.
I couldn't have put it more eloquently. That's what I wanted people to get from this show. We were talking about it at the break. Dr. Raskin was saying how he thought that so many people weren't even aware of this act in California, that more people were more aware of marijuana becoming legal than the End of Life Act. And yet this is something that all of us are going to have to deal with, whether it's a family member or ourselves or something at some point, our own immortality. And to talk about it, to me, is very inspiring and very life-affirming.
You're doing a great public service. And I just want to say, I've heard from both of your guests something that I just wanted to say very overtly, that attending to the dying is one of the holiest things that a person can do. To be in a room where one person's soul leaves the body and begins its ascent into the next realm, it's a profound and transformative experience. And people oftentimes can't experience it because they are in a panic, because they don't know what to do, because they're at a loss. And I think your program tonight is a wonderful service for people to be able to prepare for this. Not just the end of life issues that are obvious on the physicians and so forth, but just the general realm of being prepared for something that is so profoundly sacred.
And so profoundly personal.
Yes, thank you. That's true.
No, I want to thank you for your wonderful words. With the little bit of time we have left, I want to go around to our other guests and see if there are any final thoughts that they'd like to share. Dr. Raskin?
Well, again, I think one of the most important things to realize is that this law exists, and it's time to start planning before you're even sick, and it's time to start thinking about what you would want in case of a terminal illness, and start, thinking about that and talking to family members and friends, or your attorney, or your physician, or all of the above, because it's making that plan that I think can just give you some peace of mind. And again, this law will supply some patients with a lot of feeling of control over the process and dignity, which I think in and of itself is very compassionate. So I'm a big believer in respecting my patients' wishes, and again, involving their just being compassionate to how they are going to end their life, I think is so important. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Karen?
Thank you. Yes, Compassionate Choices is advocating for end-of-life options for all peoples, and I think it is very important that you talk to your family, talk to your doctor, talk to your spiritual advisor early, and let them know exactly how you feel and plan, and don't wait, because we know that if you wait to the very end, it's going to be much more difficult. It takes much longer, and the family is not going to be prepared. So do this all early.
And what I want to, again, share with our listeners, that, as you can see, this is a well thought out, very complex law, and something that's been taken seriously. It offers people dignity. It offers them a choice. It offers family dignity and choice. And obviously it's not to be taken lightly. And that's what I'm getting out of it. And when I hear these experts and Rabbi Finley talk about how how respectful this law is. It inspires me. And actually, when I told people about this show, they said, that's depressing. And my first reaction was, no, not at all. I find it uplifting. Like, that this gives me a sense that, it's a very caring and compassionate law. That was my thought around it. So,
I totally agree.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for coming on the show. And as you've heard, if you're looking for a hospice center that's supportive of the End of Life Act and where qualified patients can obtain the kind of care that Karen and Dr. Raskin are offering and the spiritual guidance that Rabbi Finley is offering, you can check out Mid-Valley Hospice. MidValleyHospice.com will answer a lot of your questions on their website, and their number is 818-386-2600. I wanted to thank everyone for coming on the show. We'll be back next week. If you want to email me, it's drhowardgluss@live.com.
This show furnished by Key Light Counseling Center.